Welcome to the Shirl and Shirley Show. Today, my guest is Jeff Calhoun. He is national spokesman for Tactical Civics. And he's here with, see, now I'll have to edit that out. I'm going to start all over because then I can just edit out the front part. All right. Welcome to the Shirl and Shirley Show. Today, my guest is Jeff Calhoun. He is the national spokesman for Tactical Civics. And he's here to share what Tactical Civics is all about and what they do across the nation. Hi, Jeff. How are you today? And we can get started. How about you introduce yourself and maybe say a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into some questions.
All right. Thank you, Cheryl. It's great to the Cheryl and Shirley. So do people call you Cheryl or do they call you Shirley?
I'm Cheryl. Yeah,
You're
I'm the
Cheryl.
Cheryl part of it. Yeah.
You're the Cheryl part of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward. We were supposed to talk a couple of weeks ago and life kind of happened and some unexpected circumstances that interrupted our scheduled conversation. So I'm happy to be with you. I've been with Tactical Civics since the fall of 2022. I think it was about
Oh,
September,
okay.
October of 2022, and eventually a couple of years later became the national spokesman. And I like to talk, and to say, hey, this guy likes to talk. Let's let him talk about Tactical Civics. Um, in my life, I've kind of had two adult lives. First half of it, from 20 to 40, I was a touring musician, recording artist, primarily in the contemporary Christian market, contemporary Christian music, and was really blessed to be able to do that and feed my family. And then in 2001, I was ordained as a pastor in the Evangelical Free Church, and then wound up serving in the Methodist Church and
Oh,
have served a couple of different churches as a pastor and worship leader and music director. And uh, there were a couple of years there where I did some consulting, but that's the church I'm in now. I've been at for 10 years. Served initially as an associate pastor, and now I'm the director of worship and technology and discipleship. So
awesome.
that's me in a nutshell.
That's great.
And I'm
I think
I'm,
that's
I'm married to
fantastic.
Gretchen, my wife, and I have two beautiful daughters, ages 23 and 24. And
Oh, that's close. Wow. 23
yeah,
and 24. That's close.
yeah.
Good
Well,
for you.
okay, the 23 is actually 22. She'll turn 23 in a month. So
Ah, well, close enough. Yeah.
they're about 19 months apart.
Yeah, my brother and I are like 18 months apart, and that's like, partners in crime is what
Yeah,
we
pretty
were when we were
much.
growing up. Yeah, that's how we were, definitely. Well, I'm glad to have you on, Jeff. I really am, and I'm glad we got a chance to talk a little bit beforehand. We talked about all kinds of things, and I
Yeah.
appreciate that. It was great. It always is great getting to know the guest before, and we talked for a little bit longer than normal, but that was good. It helped my soul. I just want you to know that, so thank you. And how about if we talk about this? How about maybe when did Tactical Civics begin? 'Cause I really don't know when it began.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's actually been in development for over 17 years.
Mm.
Over that period of time, there have been about 44 people who, with a core few who have invested about 80,000 hours of research and development, uh, primarily into who are we as Americans? What is the system of government that the founders actually gave us? And one of the ways that we like to describe what we're doing is we're digging up and dusting off the brilliant work of the founding generation, and restoring to we the people a clear understanding of what it is they gave us, because we've really lost our understanding of the system of government that they gave us. And so that core group of 44 volunteers, about 80,000 hours of research and development, had a number of iterations in terms of how do we actually uh, communicate this to we the people across America. What's the best vehicle? And eventually, it began initially as the America Again Trust, a perpetual charitable trust. And then the action mission of America Again Trust is Tactical Civics. And Tactical Civics really kind of got its public face in like 2020, 2021.
Mm.
And since then, when I joined, for instance, in 2022, I think we had 600 members. across America, and we were in about 250 counties.
Mm, okay.
And now, and that was September, October of 2022. Now we're sitting close to 9,000 members, and we're in 1,650 counties.
Wow, that's a huge
Yeah,
growth.
so that's kind of where we are. And along the way, the way that I was introduced to tactical civics was, like we talked earlier, all of us experienced 2020 and 2021 with COVID, with the election, with what we all witnessed was a very coordinated, strategic rollout of what were essentially authoritarian control measures, and it was
Absolutely.
bizarre. And but not only was it bizarre, it in a lot of people um, it resonated as uh, wrong, like fundamentally wrong against core principles. And we weren't even sure what those core principles were, but this latent kind of insomnia that we have about who we are as Americans, and the fog that's created over the generations started to lift a little bit. And we thought, wait, we're not supposed to function like this. Our elected servants aren't supposed to be able to make arbitrary determinations about who's an essential worker and who's not. What's an essential
Absolutely.
business and what's not an essential business? Who gets to make a living and support their family and who doesn't? It was strange. And then the experimental gene therapy, called the mRNA vaccines that they pushed on us at the expense of potentially effective ambulatory uh, treatments that could have mitigated a lot of the problems that COVID caused. And so all of us went through that, and we're going, wait a minute, this is not right. And like a lot of Americans, and I know your backstory, you're not one of them because you've really worked at trying to be connected and engaged, but I really wasn't. I was working in the church, and I never really bothered to learn what my responsibility was as an American, what being an American actually meant, what our system of government was, um, and to learn the duties and responsibilities that belong to we the people. Since joining Tactical Civics, I've learned what those are.
Mhm.
I've been a student of theology, uh, and a student of philosophy, and I became in 2022 a student of political economy, and really did a deep dive into the work of the founders, what their reasoning was, what were they drawing from, what was the well of understanding that created a system of government that had never before existed in the annals of human history. It was entirely unique, but yet it was built on principles that had been, developing, had been fleshed out, that go back as far as, you know, 3,000 years ago, written in the book of Deuteronomy in the Old Testament, uh, and as recent for the founders as the political theories of guys like John Locke. And, and then, the different political philosophers, through the years, because the founders were versed in Cicero and Virgil and in Plato and
Mhm.
Aristotle, and in Locke. They were versed in the thinking of the reformers, from the early 16th century. Uh, and, and when you take it all on the whole, you see uh, this radically revolutionary new idea called self-government, where the people themselves are actually the reservoir of sovereign governing authority. And in the system they created, and they articulated this over and over and over again. I was shocked just at what I discovered. And there's some great resources that people can avail themselves of to learn, if they really want to learn. Um, but I was shocked to see how resolute they were that that governing authority resided in the people and was never relinquished. It was never given away. It was merely delegated. But the authority actually remained in the people. The people were the storehouses and the reservoirs of governing authority. We wrote it into every single state constitution. Every state constitution articulates that all governing authority is inherent in the people and is consequently derived from the people. I love at I think it was the Second Continental Congress, the county of Mecklenburg in North Carolina. They wrote instructions to their delegates to the Continental Congress, and what they wrote was really just absolutely brilliant, and it gives a window into how the founding generation saw and understood what our independence meant. And the ideas that had been kind of germinating and growing in the soil of the American colonies, really from the latter part of the 17th century up until the founding
Mhm.
generation that kind of officially began in 1765. You heard it in the pulpits all across New England, this idea of self-government. And so the citizens of Mecklenburg County wrote instructions to their delegates to the Continental Congress, and they began it by making this statement. There are two types of governing authority. One is principal and supreme. The other is derived and inferior. The people possess the principal and supreme power. The delegates and servants that we employ uh, are of the second type, derived and inferior. And they proceeded with 7 points to articulate what the implications of that fundamental principle was, that within the people themselves rests principal and supreme governing authority, and in the servants they employ rests derived and inferior authority. And that was just the water they swam. I mean, that was how they understood that the relationship between the people and their servants in government was supposed to be. We've lost that in America. I mean, we really have. We have lost that understanding. We have servants in government that often assume their offices at every level, from county commissions and school boards to the U.S. Senate.
Mhm.
People assume office, elected office, with a sense of entitlement to rule, to make rules for the rest of us that we are obligated to abide by and do whatever they say. And we saw that happen during all of the COVID control measures that were rolled out in 2020, 2021.
Mhm.
Uh, and that is not who we are. And so, what we're doing in Tactical Civics, our mission statement is simply this: to glorify Jesus Christ. We are we're very public about existing to glorify Christ, because we believe that even the understanding of proper government and the role and purpose of government is a product of really of the gospel of Jesus Christ. That you see all of the principles that shaped Western culture and shaped our system of government were were products of this unique idea that came through the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that is that every person, regardless of status, was equal under the law, and that, in the early beginnings of English common law, this idea that the king doesn't make the law makes the king.
Mhm.
That was revolutionary. And that was the genesis of English common law, of which our constitutional system, was kind of the pinnacle of English common law, and the principles that evolved through that, 7 centuries, beginning in 997 AD with the Dooms of Ethelred, when the first public call to grand jury happened. And that's where, this bargain relationship began between the people uh, and the throne. And the people said, look, you don't just get to do whatever you want to do because you're king.
Mhm.
You're going to have to abide by some conditions if you want our loyalty.
Mhm.
And they laid those conditions out. And that began the idea, uh, as a formal idea in government, called the consent of the governed. And that, for the next 7 centuries, was the bargain relationship that existed in English common law. The people gave loyalty to the throne and parliament because they eventually became a dual
Mhm.
sovereignty. The people gave their loyalty in exchange for protection and the recognition of certain rights, and that was the relationship. In our system that began with the Declaration of Independence, we shifted out of the bargain. We were no longer going to bargain with a sovereign,
Mhm.
loyalty in exchange for protection. And as John Jay wrote in his first seminal Supreme Court case, at the Revolution, the sovereignty that once rested in the crown and parliament devolved onto the people themselves. They were equal as citizens and joint tenants in the sovereignty. And that was technical language that he used there.
Mhm.
And so they understood, and then they reiterated it over and over. All of the great, James Madison, uh, uh, was one that articulated that. One of the first Supreme Court justices, and right now I'm blanking on his name. It'll come back to me. Who was one of the founders from I believe from Virginia, and I can't believe I can't remember his name right now. I've got it. I've in all my notes that I've taken over the past 3 years. I've read his name, but they stated this over and over. Uh,
Mhm.
Numerous founders, numerous writers in the founding generation. This idea that in the people themselves is where sovereign authority uh, resided. The thing we haven't understood, and that Tactical Civics is trying to teach people, is okay. In principle, the, we the people are the highest office in government, and we state it at the very beginning of the Constitution. We the people do
Mhm.
ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States, and then within that Constitution, which we ordained and established, we created the offices of government. We created the three branches.
Mhm.
They're our creatures. We are their creators. It's a parent-child relationship. But we haven't really understood, or we've lost the understanding of how we are able to take specific action uh, with our sovereign authority. So, Tactical Civics, we've distilled this down into one statement in terms of what our mission is. Uh, our mission is to glorify Jesus Christ because he's the source and wellspring of truth and wisdom, to glorify Jesus Christ and maintain our civilization, all the wonders of Western civilization that have been a gift to the world, to maintain our civilization by living like responsible adults
Mhm.
and enforcing the things that we stipulate to ourselves in the Constitution. And that's what we're trying to teach Americans how to do. Um, and we don't require people to have a statement of faith when they join Tactical Civics, but we do make sure they understand uh, that we exist to glorify Christ. That's
Mhm.
that's our
Sure.
first. But we also exist to teach people what it is to be an American. What are the
Mhm.
chores that you're expected to do? And we've kind of come to an understanding of what those are, and we've also come to an understanding of the diagnosis of the problem that we all, whether we understand it in explicit terms, uh, we all understand it implicitly that our system of government is dysfunctional. And we would say even that it has become a criminogenic system. We don't think every person that serves in office is a criminal, but we do think without unambiguously that they are existing within a criminogenic system that has for generations usurped and violated the clear terms of the trust that we gave them, our highest law, both federally and in our states, in our Constitution. We gave them specific duties and we limited those duties and those powers and those authorities that we delegated to them. And they have stepped way outside of those limits and they've done so with impunity. And
Mhm.
that's because we were supposed to have the job of holding them accountable to follow the terms of our highest law and to put them in check when they don't abide by those terms. And so that's what we're teaching people to do.
Well, do you think that, some of this issue has come along? I mean, obviously, we both know that it's changed. The political scene has changed over the last 10 years significantly. But do you think some of this has been brought on by social media, and some of these people that get into politics now become social media stars? They become influencers. I mean, it's all about getting clicks. It's all about what they say. It's all about how they do it instead of being a representative for the people, because that's how I believe too, is that when you're a representative for the people. I was one of the people who elected you to represent me, and you are not representing me. I can be, many of them are not. I mean, there are people that are representing me, and I know many of them personally, and I'm grateful for them. And I'm grateful for the relationship that I have with them so that I can talk to them, even if it's something that I don't agree on. And I do that often, believe me. But, and I think that's what constituents should do. You should be able to contact your representatives and talk to them and let them know how you feel, or their office, call them up. But, this whole thing, I mean, you'll see it. I'll see it many times. I'll get an email from somebody and call so and so and tell them this right now. And it's sort of like, wait a minute, you're playing on emotion. That, really, let's look at, I mean, I try to look at both sides of everything. I really do. I talk to anybody. I'll talk to anybody on whatever side of whatever aisle you come from, because I want to learn why they feel that way and why they don't want to understand that my civil liberties were very much violated during COVID. And what you just said was all about civil liberties, and people don't understand that. And I think, like I said before, when we talked off, was that fear was thrown out there and mandates, and I'm sorry, but that's not a law. And
Right.
I think a lot of people, I think even our representatives, even statewide in Wisconsin, they were shocked. They didn't know what to do. I think a lot of people just didn't know what to do at the time that were in places of authority or elected officials. So
Well,
I give them grace. I give them a little grace, but I also thought, don't push the line too far, because we can't allow that to happen. And that's what I think you're saying. Tactical Civics is trying to teach people that there is a place, where we have to draw a line and say, wait a minute, you're
yeah.
going way above where you're supposed to be. But I want to know what you think about the social media issue, because I do think that has a big pull in it. I started doing a podcast because I saw what was going on out there. And actually what happened was, I think I told you, I had a friend down in Milwaukee, and he said to me, I was griping because there's no media here in my area where I live, central Wisconsin. And he was like, become the media, stop griping about it. Oh, okay, I guess I could do that. How do I do it? And I thought, well, I could do a podcast. And that's kind of how this whole journey started for me. So I just kind of wonder if you think that social media, because I do think it has a huge part to do with a lot of what we're talking about.
Well, so that, yeah, there's a few things that I think are important to clarify. It- it- I think the terms that we use, and so when we think about government, we're actually thinking about two very distinct areas of thought, and one is political economy, and political economy is just uh, you know the function of government, a description of the different parts and how they work together to to produce law, to protect liberty, uh, and what those the different cogs in the wheel, what they do, how they work, how they're supposed to work. Then the other area of thought that for me is more critical is political philosophy, and that is to understand the values and the principles that support the political economy. And so, uh, while obviously, and this has been true since before we became uh, an independent republic uh, of sovereign states, since the printing press, and even
Mm.
before, there has always been some avenue or pathway of technology that has that that uh, people in power have leveraged in order to accomplish their ultimate goals. Uh, and that that is just a cog in the wheel and the dance of political economy. And so social media is just the latest thing to come along, but the song
Mhm,
hasn't changed.
mhm.
Uh, it's just the way it's danced to. It's the same song, different dance. So that's how I look at social media. But
Yeah,
but the
I understand that, but I think some things that, like, the social media part of it, it's moving so fast. That's the part,
Yeah,
that frustrates people because, if you get boom, you get this, and then 4 minutes later, boom, you got that, and then you got that, and then you got that, and people's minds are soaked in all of this, and some people will just believe exactly what they saw right there in that 4 minutes
yeah.
time.
Oh, there's no question, that it's much easier to manipulate people.
Yes, yes, that's
COVID
kind of what my point was. I
Yeah,
think easier for even, like, people in politics, our representatives and senators, even Supreme Court, for instance. I mean, all of it. They can influence people and they can make anger come within seconds or minutes, and, it's a shame that that's what we're seeing instead of trying to understand, trying to
yeah.
figure it out and see where we stand there as citizens in our country.
So, yeah, the social media and mass media, look, we've had broadcast media that
Mm.
have been operated as coordinated, strategic messaging apparatus
Absolutely.
for the deep state for decades.
Absolutely.
And
Totally.
so that's reality. But the problem, like, what it is that we're being conditioned to do or how it is that we're being conditioned to think, it actually goes way back, and so I'm gonna give just a little bit of a history lesson to kind of show us how we
Sure.
got here.
Great.
At the very beginning, when they were debating at the Constitutional Convention, there were there were 2 systems of thought. There was a group in America who believed that governing was impossible without an aristocracy, a permanent aristocracy.
Mhm.
That probably the majority of colonists in America, and particularly those who were, the landowners, the business owners, the colonial magistrates and leaders and representatives. There were a significant number of those who believed that a permanent aristocracy was necessary, or a monarchy, and who wanted that. And we're hoping that, that's they wanted to make George Washington king. And then there was a minority group that believed that the people were capable of governing themselves. So, within those and within the 2 camps in our nation's in our republic's founding, so you could distill it down to 2 names: Hamilton, Jefferson. Hamilton had a view and a vision of America that he wasn't at all alone in. That economy should be concentrated, wealth should be concentrated in corporate entities, and then and that's where and how we would gain wealth, accumulate wealth, and become wealthy. He was a huge advocate of a central bank, a national bank,
Mhm.
and basically a just a different form of of the mercantilist system that existed in England, uh, before we ever became a republic. That was the
Um,
Hamiltonian vision. It
I'm
was act
sure that I'm sure that he kinda thought of it as it's easier because we already have that to follow from
Yeah,
England,
yeah, yeah,
you know?
it's easier, it's
Sure.
simpler, and, it's a little less complicated,
Right.
and it guarantees the people that we always, want to have on our side, which are the moneyed interests,
Sure.
that their positions are secured. Um, and and it was just, it was essentially a mercantilist system. I mean, there was a motion on the floor of the Constitutional Convention, to dissolve the states.
Mm.
I mean, that wasn't a fringe idea. It was like, we just need to dissolve the states and just be one nation, just one big nation. No sovereign states, no individual states. That was a motion that was put on the floor. It wasn't like not considered. It didn't win the day, obviously, but that was an idea.
Mhm,
And Hamilton, very much wanted to see something like that happen. He wanted to see Washington become a permanent monarch. He wanted a centralized, very strong central government and a somewhat managed economy by preferred, favored corporate interests, and a very strong central government. Jefferson was the complete opposite. Jefferson
mhm,
believed that we should be a nation of independent owners, and whether that's a shopkeeper that's making shoes, or whether it's a landowner that is raising crops or livestock, animals,
mhm,
whether that was it did, but that we needed to be a nation of independent owners where people could engage freely in economic relationships. I mean, it was the pure vision of laissez-faire capitalism, free
mhm,
trade, free
mhm,
unencumbered economic relationships where a government couldn't step in and interfere, assume control, favor one side of that relationship with the other, that people would be free to engage. So the idea that won the day in the Constitutional Convention was the Madisonian, Jeffersonian idea of a republic of independent states with a strong central government, but a very, very limited central government. And so there was something that happened in the convention, uh, on we're talking the 11th hour. So we had put in Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, the apportionment formula about how representation would be, kinda lived out in our republic. And they had put, a formula for after the first census. So, they decided that once, the Constitution was ratified, and that first Congress, which everyone without fail in America thought was too small. There's too few representatives, too few, that are calling the shots. So they put in there 3 years after the Constitution's ratified, we're gonna have a census, and then we're gonna have apportionment, uh, ratioed at 1 representative for every 40,000 people. In the 11th hour of the convention, Nathaniel Gorham from Massachusetts raises his hand, says, "I'd like to make a motion to change that to 1 for every 30,000." And then George Washington stood up to speak for the first time in 4.5 months. He hadn't said a word on the floor of the Constitutional Convention. And he stands up and he says, "As late as the hour is for this amendment to be introduced, I strongly encourage its passage, because this is the issue that the people are most concerned about." And what he had heard over that 4.5 month period, people are concerned about too few representing the people. And so I strongly encourage the passage that we change the number. And so that was 40,000 was changed from 30,000. It was just changing literally one word.
hmm,
So the rest is history. The Constitution is sent to the states, and all the states. Now, it was contentious. It wasn't a huge landslide. There were a lot of close
mhm,
votes in states, and Rhode Island had to have its arm twisted. But if you read the records of the state ratification debates, which I have done over the past 3 years, you see different delegates in different states operating and actually, uh, uh, actually articulating one of their rationales for being in agreement with the Constitution was the ratio of representation.
hmm,
Yeah, William Carey Nicholas, who was a delegate in the Virginia House of Delegates, at the Virginia ratification convention. He on the floor in his arguments, he said, and he went on to become governor of Virginia, went on to serve in the Senate. And he said, "I take it for granted that, that the people will always be afforded the greatest number possible to be represented, to always have their concerns, kept in mind and known and understood. And I assume that that number will always be no less than 1 for every 30,000 people."
Interesting. Okay.
And so that, and you hear that in different ratification debates. And
Mhm.
so the Constitution's ratified, and then 2 years later came the famous, what we call the Bill of Rights. Now, the Bill of Rights are the Constitution. They're just amendments to the
Mhm.
Constitution, but
Mhm.
they have the same weight that Article 6 gives the Constitution, which is, "This is the supreme law of the land,
Mhm.
this Constitution." And so the amendments are the supreme law of the land. And what most people don't know in American history is that, uh, when they sent the Articles of Amendment, uh, to the people that Congress passed unanimously and sent to the people, to the states for ratification, there were 12 amendments, not 10, 12. Now, we think that the Bill of Rights is 10 amendments, but actually the Bill of Rights is 12 amendments.
Mm.
Amendment number 1 and amendment number 2 were not initially ratified. What was so let's start with number 2. Number 2 wasn't initially ratified. What was its subject? It was really simple. The original Second Amendment simply stated that, should Congress, uh, by legislation, increase their, remuneration, it shall not take effect until an election is intervened and a new Congress is seated. Simple.
Mm.
If they increase their pay, that pay doesn't take effect, that pay raise doesn't take effect,
Till the
uh,
new Congress
until there's an
is
election and a
sure,
new Congress is seated.
sure.
For whatever reason, only 10 of, the original 13, ratified that, and so it fell short, and, which meant that it was simply a pending amendment because why? We were adding new states. I mean, it wasn't, but by the time
Sure.
we got to 1780, 89, 17, 91, 92, we had added 3 states. We had
Mhm.
15 states.
Mhm.
The original, so that sits there, and then what happens? Most people don't know this story. 200 years later, a University of Texas college student finds out, named Greg Watson, finds out about the original Second Amendment and that it's sitting as a pending amendment, awaiting ratification. And he reads it and thinks, well, this is a no-brainer. Congress shouldn't be able to receive a pay raise during the term that they voted into law. And so he goes on a personal crusade that takes him 9 years.
Wow.
In 1992, the 38th state, so there were 10 originally, he successfully got 28 more states to ratify this amendment to the Constitution. And
Mhm.
in 1992, after the 38th state had a yes vote to ratify that amendment, it became our 27th Amendment, still the
Mm.
most recent amendment to the Constitution. Okay,
Interesting.
so what was the original First Amendment? What was its subject? What did the founders make item number 1 on the list of rights that needed to be secured? Why was the pay of Congress a right that needed to be secured to the people? Well, because the people's interests are the goal of government. That was a philosophy that was etched in stone. The goal of government is the happiness of the people, the
Mhm.
good of the people. That's the only reason government exists. And so it doesn't exist for the benefit of any single person or group of persons.
Mhm.
And so that needed to be protected. And so they couldn't benefit the people that we elect to serve us as, that we employ. They shouldn't be allowed to reap a benefit from that without, uh, showing good behavior and getting reelected.
Mhm.
And so that was considered a right of the people to be protected against our servants, uh, doing a hit and run and taking benefit and increasing their benefit in their service. So that was considered a right. Well, what was the first thing that they considered a right? And that was the right of representation. And in the original First Amendment, what they did was they laid out a formula for the ratio of representation. Remember the story with Nathaniel Gorham in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 4, changed from 1 to 40,000 to 1 to 30,000. And that became the formula in the Constitution, which all the delegates at the State Ratification Convention took for granted would be the ratio and would remain
Mhm.
the ratio. Well, they realized Congress is going to grow, the population is going to grow. So they said, okay, here's how big we're going to allow representative districts to get. And here's what they wrote in the original First Amendment. The ratio of representation shall be 1 for every 30,000 until such time as the number in Congress reaches 100, after which the ratio will be 1 for every 40,000. So representative districts will now grow from 30,000 to 40,000. So that's going to be the ratio until such time as Congress shall reach 200 in number,
Mhm.
after which the ratio will be 1 for every 50,000, and that's where they stopped. 11 states ratified it, and actually, what history shows is that Connecticut ratified it, but a controversy broke out because the Senate and the House had 2 different versions. One said one no more than 1 for every 50,000, and the House version said no less than 1 for every 50,000.
Mhm.
They had each voted to ratify the so there was a transcribing error by Otis, the registrar for the U.S. Congress. That his team, there was somebody transcribed what Connecticut got.
Mhm.
Now, was there anything nefarious? I don't know, but I know that Connecticut's Senate and House had 2 different versions, and when they realized that, they wanted to withdraw their vote, but the rules wouldn't allow it. They had ratified, uh, uh, these amendments, but
Mhm.
ratified and then they wanted to change the wording. Rules wouldn't allow that. So what did they do? They sealed their vote of ratification and never delivered it to Congress.
Mm. Okay.
And so 11 states ratified it. Well, the original first right is still a pending amendment. Right now, Cheryl, we have, uh, you were talking about representation. Uh, w- we have on average, the ratio of representation is 1 representative for every
I know.
750,000 people.
Yeah, I know.
There are some districts, uh, that have almost 1,000,000 souls that one
Mhm.
person is supposed to be representing, and, any reasonable person would
Super.
I've asked candidates for US Senate,
Mhm.
or US House, if they think that that ratio accomplishes reasonably adequate representation, and they've all
Of
said.
course not. Yeah, of course not. There's no way it could. No.
So
I
we have
mean
a pending amendment. We have a pending amendment that
mhm.
if 27 states would ratify it, would would bring our representative districts back to a number that could actually be represented. Now, you've been in Republican politics, and I know you've seen this, like you've witnessed it firsthand, and virtually every state has, and that is that every 10-year blood sport of redistricting.
Sure. In Wisconsin, the state, we've had it gerrymandered many times, and actually it went up to our Supreme Court, and the first time, it's just it's
It's
a shame.
Bloodsport. I mean,
It
it
is. It
it
is.
really is because
Yeah.
it's where the party in power tries to
Yeah.
retain power by
Sure.
redrawing the lines
Right.
to favor, the next vote.
Mhm.
If we had adequate representation, gerrymandering would become a thing of the past. It
It
would
should be. It's
it
really something that none of us really like at all. I mean,
it
I
it
don't
would disappear.
either side, anywhere. I don't care what side you're
Yeah,
on or where
and
you
see, that's the
stand.
thing. Tactical Civics, we're really not interested in partisan
You're
politics.
nonpartisan. You're a nonpartisan
Yeah,
organization.
we're
Okay.
about restoring sanity and the
Yeah.
rule of law.
Okay.
We're about uh, we're about restoring to we the people, and
Mhm.
really just those who will do the chores, like who will actually assume responsibility. We want to restore uh, the understanding of and the proper application of our authority to hold our servants accountable. So, where is that authority? Like, where, yeah, certainly we can vote, but I think
Mhm.
any honest person that just does a survey of the last several decades or even the last several generations would say that because representation has been essentially and effectively uh, stripped from the people. And they did that in 1929 in the Reapportionment Act. It was illegal. It was unconstitutional. They put a limit on the size of the House of Representatives, and the measure they used was how many butts they could put in the House chambers.
Sure.
And that's like that's like the shoe telling the shoe telling the foot how big it's going to get.
Yeah. Right.
And it was illegal. It's a clear and explicit violation, one of many, violation of the clear language of the Constitution.
Mhm.
And so and they had already transgressed that, a few generations or a generation, before that in the late
Sure.
1800s. Um, so, what we're trying to do is restore to the people an understanding of how it is that we actually act in our sovereign authority. Now,
So
there
you're
have been a
trying.
lot of wingnut groups out there like Sovereign Citizens and,
Yeah.
other, that think that, me, Jeff Calhoun, I am a sovereign in America and I can just walk into whatever government building or whatever and tell them how
Right.
things are gonna go, how things
Yeah.
are gonna be, and that they can take their toys and go home, and I'm in charge, and I'm
Mhm.
telling you that that's not what we're doing.
No.
What
I
Tactical
yeah.
Civics has diagnosed is that what the founders gave us is collective sovereignty. Remember
Mhm.
John Jay's statement that we are joint tenants in the sovereignty?
Mhm.
That's important language. That means that our sovereignty operates as an entity with separate parts that function in the process, but the sovereignty is a collective sovereignty.
Mhm.
And so the question is how do we actually we in the Constitution, uh, we stipulated certain specific authorities to the people. And then in the Ninth and 10th Amendment, and then we stipulated authorities to the people, and then we put tremendous limitations on the authority of our servants in government that
Mhm.
they've transgressed, um, and we've not held them accountable for it. But then in the Ninth and 10th Amendment, we did two things. In the Ninth Amendment, we said that the rights enumerated in the Constitution shall not be taken to disparage other rights not stipulated or not enumerated. So the fact that we uh, articulated specific rights in the Constitution, the right to free speech, freedom of worship, the right to
Mhm.
keep and bear arms, for the defense, for the security of a free state. It's the only thing. The only thing that was called necessary in the Constitution was militia. You know what the
Mhm.
founders understood militia to be? The people at arms connected to their subordinate government in an official capacity. But it was
Mhm.
one of the offices that was exclusively under the aegis of the people, but in partnership with the elected magistrate, because that is the history of militia. Militia has always been established formally, lawfully by the elected
Mhm.
magistrate, but it has belonged to the people, not agents of the government. It's
Mhm.
a symbiotic relationship between the servants we elect and then the people's responsibility to enforce the law. And
Mhm.
we used to understand that, and you can see it in our history. You can see it in the Alien and Sedition Acts in 1898, in 1798, when militia regiments in Kentucky and Virginia sent public notices, posted public notices, sent notices to Congress, and said, "We refuse to enforce these unconstitutional acts." and declare them to be null and void. Those were militia regiments who were
Mhm.
connected to their states, uh, well ordered and regulated and disciplined according to the prescription by Congress. That's we have that in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, I think it is, where we give the states the responsibility of equipping and disciplining and
Mhm.
ordering the militia. Uh, but we give Congress the responsibility of prescribing what that discipline will be so that it'll be uniform. But we give the states the responsibility of making it actually
Sure,
happen. And we used to do
sure.
that. And you see militia regiments step out in their stipulated authority because Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, it says militia to enforce the laws of the Union. That was a militia's job. Who was the militia? Every founder. You can read it. They would say it was Federalist 46. Madison talked about it at length. Brilliant. It's the people at arms. It's the whole body of the people at arms.
Mhm.
And it was understood, what we articulate in the Second Amendment, that uh, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Those two phrases, conjoined phrases, were
Mhm.
never, ever considered to be separated. People bore arms first and foremost for the purpose of volunteering to serve, for the
Mhm.
protection, the security of the liberties of the free state. That was what
Mhm.
they understood. That's what all the founders understood. We gave that away. We let federal government, absolutely strip that any enforcement capacity of the people connected to their subordinate government. We let them strip that away. And so we're teaching people, that's one arm, but what's the other arm? Like, what certainly we vote, uh, and voting matters. Voting is important. But when representation has effectively been stripped away from you, it makes in some ways, it really does make voting more of a ritual gesture than it does the
Mhm.
people, uh, taking action in their sovereign capacity.
So basically, this is what I'm getting from all this. Obviously you're educating me in history some, which I haven't had education in history quite like that for quite a while. But what you're basically saying to me is that you are trying to educate citizens to understand what your history was from the founding fathers, and that we need to bring that into this time so they can have a voice again because they don't understand. And here's my thing to that. Okay, I mean, I've been very active for many years, so I get where you're coming from. I wish people would take the time to learn enough about candidates at any time, wherever they are. I mean, local. I think a lot of people. We just had this happen in Wisconsin. Local Supreme Court and your local city school board, all that. People just don't come out and vote, and it blows my mind because that's where you make. I like to hold up my tax bill, and I like to say, on this tax bill, every single thing you're gonna vote for in April is on this tax bill. All my counties to everything. Those people are more important to me right now where I sit because they're the ones that are raising my taxes, and it makes me angry, that I'm paying their salary as they're raising my taxes for things that I don't agree with. What's going on in public schools,
Well,
things like
let
that.
me ask you, what do you think, the recourse is for the people if if there is a very clear suspicion that, your county commission is violating the law at some like, let's say that your county commission has been awarded a federal grant or a state grant of a couple of $1,000,000, and a part of that grant is, they're gonna install some public installation. It could be a park, it could be a visitor
Mhm,
center, it could be a museum, it could be an education. But the county commission has been awarded this grant to install this, make this public installation. As part of that,
mhm,
there's a $250,000 landscaping, uh, contract that's a part of the
mhm,
bid, or a part of the grant.
mhm,
Terms of the grant say that, it should be a blind bid, there should be 3, and maybe there's been multiple grants, and you find out that, a brother-in-law of a county commission, was awarded the grant and it was a no bid, contract, no one else
mhm,
bid on it. uh, and there's a suspicion that could be a violation of law, or maybe uh, you get wind of a pay to play scheme that's happening,
Sure.
between a prosecutor and
Mhm.
a county judge or one of your elected
Sure.
servants. What is the if there's a suspicion that something like that is happening in your county or in your district, in your state, what's the recourse of the people?
Well, the recourse that I'm aware of is that you can do a recall, and that's the recourse that I know of and that I have worked on before in my
Okay. So
past.
let me tell you how we've done this from the very beginning before we even had a constitution that actually secured our independence and without which we never would have become an independent republic because
Mhm.
all of the patriots who were resisting the lawlessness and demanding that the king and parliament abide by the law. The patriots in America were not rebels. They were actually pressing for the law to be upheld. They were
Mhm.
calling for the rule of law. It was the king and parliament who were the lawless rebels that were
Mhm.
violating the law. The one institution that was had 7 centuries of history, uh, for English common law, for the American colonies, that protected Sam Adams, protected John Hancock, uh, protected, John Adams, protected Patrick Henry, uh, protected all of those patriots who were pressing the fight for the rule of law to be recognized and established. It was the colonial grand jury, a
Mhm.
feature of English common law where the people themselves, operating under the authority of nothing but their own conscience, were making
Mhm.
determinations of law related to and what the colonists understood was that the grand jury was a bulwark against
Mhm.
the tyranny of government.
Yeah.
And so time and time again, when the imperial justices and the imperial prosecutors were trying to throw patriots in jail, for instance, there was a group that had taken crates of tea from the Boston Harbor.
Mhm. Mhm.
They didn't throw it in the water, they took it out into a field and set it on fire.
Mhm.
Well, the imperial justice, imperial prosecutor, sought to arrest and try and convict and imprison those patriots that did that. What prevented that? It was the colonial grand jury who refused to issue a bill of indictment. Instead,
Mhm.
they issued an ignoramus bill, which is, we don't find that this rises to the level that you
Mhm.
prosecute. John
Right.
Hancock was sitting in an admiralty jail because the crown had created these admiralty courts, which were juryless courts, and they were gonna bypass the right of jury. They were gonna
Mhm.
bypass the right of grand jury and just imprison patriots, and John Hancock was sitting in 1769 in Suffolk County Admiralty Jail, and the crown had one witness against him who had perjured himself. Well, Suffolk County grand jury got wind of that, and they initiated an investigation into this person who had perjured himself and lied about John Hancock's activity.
Mhm.
And then they issued an indictment against this man. What happened after that? He fled the county because he knew an indictment by a grand jury was something that had teeth and he was going to be called
Mhm.
to answer for. Because then the Crown didn't have a witness, they had to release John Hancock. Had it not been for the Suffolk County grand jury taking the initiative to initiate an investigation on the suspicion of perjury, John
Mhm.
Hancock would have never had his John Hancock on the Declaration of Independence. We would have
Yeah.
never seen it.
Well, I get where you're coming from, but you're talking about, like, so many years ago, and so it's really hard to do that in this day and age. I know it might be the law, it might be something that you can do, but I can't even imagine myself going down to the courthouse or going down wherever to the sheriff because he has a lot of more power than most people do in the county and saying, "Hey, I'm ready to, like, set up a grand jury as a citizen, and I know that I have rights as a citizen," but they're gonna
Yeah.
go, "Sure, you're kinda
Well,
nuts." Unless you had 200
Justice
people with
Antonin
you.
Scalia, in his 1992 decision in a case called U.S. versus Williams, He laid out the whole history, function, scope,
Mhm.
independence, authority, scope of inquiry of grand jury in this decision. And
Mhm.
and and Scalia stated in explicit terms that the people have the right to make the demand on the court to impanel a grand jury to initiate for the investigation of and he laid out two thresholds in that decision that weren't his thresholds. It was the history of how grand jury had always
Mhm.
functioned, and he said it still existed. One was if there is a suspicion that a law's been criminally violated. They didn't need evidence. They didn't need affidavits. They didn't need
Mhm.
testimony. All they needed was a suspicion. His second threshold was, or if the people, and he, was very clear about that because
Mhm.
grand jury is under the aegis of the people. If the people merely want the assurance that a law is not being criminally violated, they have the right to make the demand on the constituting court, who is
Mhm.
then obligated to impanel the people's panel, the grand jury, in
Mhm.
order to investigate and then make the determination whether or not there is reasonable cause to believe that a law was criminally violated. That is our authority. We
Mhm.
enshrined it in the Fifth Amendment. It is the people's recourse, not, not civil lawsuits,
Mhm.
not FOIA requests, but an investigation by a grand jury who can summons witnesses, who can arrest for evidence and records and email exchanges
Mhm.
and bank statements. If the people believe, look, we're talking about a grand jury system functioning the way that it functioned 7 centuries prior
Mhm.
to our independence, and that it has, for the most part, functioned since then. But our ignorance of how grand jury is actually, what our authority is when we're seated on grand jury, it's what Scalia called it was like a fourth branch of government.
Mhm.
It's where the people are able to, when a grand jury is impaneled, it is, when it comes to making a determination about reasonable cause of a criminal violation of the law, no matter who it is,
Mhm.
there's not a higher authority. No one can countermand the decision of a grand jury. Without grand jury doesn't decide guilt or innocence. That's the petit jury that does that. And again,
Right.
that's the people making that determination. And what has been a feature of that uh, authority of the people is that they're not only judging the facts of a case, they're also judging the implementation of law and the law
Mhm.
itself. That's the people's right. Uh, that
So, how many grand juries has Tactical Civics implemented?
Yeah, so
Or
what we're doing is, the only way that this can happen, if you impanel a grand jury, let's say in my state, and I'll tell you, when I was, giving, a seminar on the people's authority in grand jury and how we need to learn what that is and learn
Mhm.
how to implement it, learn what our duties are related to service in grand jury, to actually restore the opportunity for the people to volunteer to serve, to make sure that their names are on the roll, because a lot of people's names are not getting are not making it to the roster where grand jury is chosen from. I know people have been chosen for grand jury half a dozen times. I've never been chosen for grand jury. Why is that?
Interesting.
Well, we need to restore a process that makes
Mhm.
sure that people can say, "Hey, I want to make sure my name is on. I'm a registered voter. I'm
Mhm.
a citizen of this county. I want my name to be on the roster." We need to provide that mechanism. But here's what happened when I was giving a presentation. Somebody said, "I served on grand jury." And let me tell you what happened. When we were sitting, when the judge impaneled the grand jury and read us our instructions and administered our oath of office, uh,
Mhm.
everything that the judge said lines up 100% with everything that you've described is the independence,
Mhm.
the scope of inquiry, and the authority of grand jury, right down the line. They operate independently. They do not need the leave of court to summons witnesses. They examine and question their own witnesses. They do not need the leave of court to arrest for evidence. They have authority, and the court is obligated to uh, 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 to abide by whatever determinations the grand jury is making, and to fulfill every officer of the court, every employee of county government, city is obligated to fulfill the request of grand jury.
Mhm.
The only thing they can't do is abridge somebody's constitutional rights. That's the only thing they can't do. She said, when the judge read our instructions and ministered our oath, everything that he read about independence, authority, scope of inquiry was right down the line, exactly what you've said.
Mhm.
But when we got into the grand jury chambers, the Commonwealth's attorney came in and she said, verbatim, I know what the judge told you, but let me explain how we do things here in our county. And then she proceeded to, say, well, look, we know that you're not getting paid very much to serve on grand jury, and we don't want to take up any more of your time than is necessary. We want to get this. We want to expedite this process, and so I will lead the process. One guy raised his hand. He said, "Aren't we allowed to question witnesses?" But she had said, "I will ask the question. I'll
Mhm.
cross-examine the witnesses, and you
Mhm.
just observe and go over what I present to you and listen to the testimony, and you can make your determination." So a guy raised his hand and said, "Aren't we allowed to ask questions?" And she said, "Well, if you have any questions, you just pass those questions to me. I'll determine whether or not they're material to the case."
Mhm.
That's not how grand jury operates. The
Right.
grand jury does not serve the prosecutor.
Right.
Grand jury is under the aegis of the people. We serve the people.
Right.
And the prosecutor serves us. And
Right.
what and so here's the thing, when about what you asked, have you
Yeah.
impaneled any grand juries? Or if you impanel a grand jury, and so every person in that grand jury room, even, you know, that guy's question aside, it was a reasonable question to ask.
Sure.
But when the prosecutor told him, "I'll I'll decide if the question is relevant,"
Right.
everyone in there went, "Okay." And
Well, I know, but I'm just saying though, if
they thought
you
that
I mean,
what they didn't know, and what he didn't know, is that they had the authorities to say, "Okay, Madam Prosecutor, we need to be clear about something. You're serving us here, we're not serving you. We're
right.
actually the authority in the law. Like,
Yeah.
we are the authority on making this determination of law, and, uh, we'll take what you have, we'll take your witness list, but we wanna look at the case in private
Sure.
without, uh, uh, without your interference. So
Mhm.
you can go now and, if you have work to catch up on, or, whatever you
Mhm.
want, you go do that, and we'll let you know if we need you."
Right.
But
Yeah,
see,
I get it. I would have
nobody under
probably
nobody understands that they
oh,
are in the seat of authority.
so you guys are really like an organization that's trying to just teach people what they have a right to do with, the law that
Not no not
is
what they have
in
a
there.
right to do, and this is clear. We're very precise about terms. They don't have a right to do it, they have the authority to do it.
Okay, the authority to do it.
And that's
And
we've been conditioned, Cheryl,
I know, oh, I
we've
know,
been
believe me,
conditioned to view our relationship to government
mhm,
like the British subjects who were pressing the
yeah,
king and parliament for the recognition of their rights.
sure.
We
Well, they
believe we're
want you to be.
subjects, and we
Well,
believe that they are our rulers, and that we have to plead with them for the recognition of our rights. And what we've lost completely and entirely in the American conscience is we've lost the understanding that we actually occupy a place of real, legal, lawful authority.
sure, sure. I agree. 100% with you. I don't have a problem doing it. I think I told you that I have no
Yeah,
problem
yeah.
speaking
And
up
that's what
and
we're
whatever.
trying to restore that. We're
Yeah,
trying to restore that specifically through specific action. The only way we
I
can do it, though, is we have to build a proportionately large number of people in our county.
sure.
And
Yeah.
so we have a target number, but once we do that, once we build a proportionately large number of people, which is happening, I mean, we've got
Mhm,
counties where we're getting close. Once we do that, then we move forward with our, 3rd action step. And the 3rd
m'kay.
action step is to get, county ordinances passed that
Mhm,
simply restore, uh, the people's authority, independence, and scope of inquiry in grand jury, and make grand jury accessible so that people can make sure that their names are on the roster. And we also establish, through our ordinances, uh, we establish a threshold that 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 puts a mandate on the court to impanel the grand jury if one is not already impaneled. The constituting court once
Yeah.
once a certain number of complaints have been submitted to the court
Mhm.
by the people
Sure,
saying, "Hey,
sure.
we're concerned about this issue,"
Mhm,
uh, then the court is obligated at that point to impanel, and then once that happens, and it's a blind draw. This is there's no way. There's a great conversation that happened between Jefferson and Hamilton about this very issue,
mhm,
because Hamilton was trying to take something out of the province of grand jury and put it in the hands of customs officials,
mhm,
and to notify him of anyone who violated the neutrality laws. And Jefferson said, "Absolutely not. That's the province of grand jury." And why is it important? And this is what Jefferson said that that still holds true today regarding grand jury. He says, "Because they're not permanent in the office, they
mhm.
can't perpetuate or persecute a neighbor whom they despise,
Well, I
because
think how you're
they're chosen at random, and
right,
then they're they serve their term,
mhm,
and then they're gone."
right,
And so that
which is good,
which
that's how it should be.
prevents, it prevents attacking political enemies.
Yeah,
Once the court impanels, once the complaints have been made, the people have made it clear that this is the public will, that something be looked at, then that grand jury is chosen from the existing roster,
mhm,
chosen randomly. We
mhm,
also put a process in our ordinances that makes sure that that process is done without corruption, that it's transparent, and that it's done the way it's supposed to be. But
mhm,
it's a group of our neighbors who are chosen
right,
at random, and then the decision is left to them under the weight of their own conscience. We
right,
just wanna make sure people in our community understand that that's how it's supposed to work, that their conscience as a group is the law of the land. Like, it is the
mhm,
authority that determines whether or not someone uh, should be held to answer for a
mhm,
criminal violation of the law. It's
yeah,
not it's not efficient, it's not quick, but it's core to our, existence as a constitutional republic where we actually have sovereign authority that we are is stipulated to hold our servants accountable when they violate the law. And right
mhm,
now, we don't realize we have it, and when we do realize we have it, we don't know how to act on it. And when we do know how to act on it, there are so few people who understand that, like, if we pulled together a grand jury in my county right now, no one would know that they have that authority, that they have that
mhm,
independence, that they have that scope of inquiry, and that they can tell the prosecutor, "We'll do the job here, that,
mhm.
we're duty bound. We're duty bound." So we're trying to say, "Look, Americans, and particularly Christians in America, if anyone should understand fidelity to."
Well, can I give you
Yeah,
just a little bit of, advice from somebody who's been active and involved for a long time, and I mean, obviously, I know, a lot about politics, obviously. I think I told you that it's a sport. Unfortunately, God gave it to me. I don't know. I don't understand that, but whatever. I'm grateful for it. But one thing that I would do, I mean, I like the history part of it. I do, but I think maybe you could find a way to cut that down just a little bit so you don't like what I know people that if I was talking to people right now, okay, if we were just talking in front of a group, if we were just a panel somewhere, there would be people going on their phone. They would not be paying attention to us because they get bored so easy. That's part of the problem of getting your message out. And that's, I mean,
yeah,
it's just a problem with everything and anything you talk about nowadays. And they just don't, they're like, Jefferson, unfortunately, not many people understand the founding fathers. I carry a pocket constitution with me all the time, just so I can go over things sometimes with people. When I get into a deep conversation, like you and I have been doing,
Yeah.
I mean, those are deep conversations. You educated me on some things that I hadn't remembered. It's like, holy cow, I don't even remember that. But it's good to be educated and it's good to be updated. But I just think when you're doing it, because you're very passionate. I appreciate that very much. You are very passionate in what you're doing. I'm grateful that you are doing it because you're obviously called to do it. That's what I feel. I feel like you're called to do it
Yeah,
because
no
you have a
question.
passion. Yeah, you have a passion for it. You really want to get people educated. You want people to
All
know
I'm doing
this.
is calling the called, and we recognize that not everyone's gonna feel a calling to do this.
Oh,
Uh,
I don't think that that's it. I think there are people. I think that when I talk to people, like some of the people right now are so concerned about paying their house payment, doing this, doing that. They
sure.
they don't have they can't comprehend all of the heaviness, the educational part of it.
Yeah.
But I do think that, there's definitely a place, and honestly, there are people, probably more in our age group, maybe, um, maybe some hopefully 30s to whatever. I'm gonna send this podcast to my son directly because he will like to listen. He
I
loves
think there's
history.
a young generation. You see the people that Charlie Kirk is
Yes.
is attracting at
Yeah. Yeah.
universities. I think there's a
Yeah.
young generation that are really wanting to walk away from, the prison of social media, and
I hope
maybe
so.
maybe use it as a tool, but who recognize that that there is responsibility,
Mhm.
and that, that there is something unique and special about America. Uh,
There is,
that
definitely.
that and, w w if people don't if people don't wanna learn, that's fine. Uh, there's a lot to learn,
I know,
and
there is. I know.
there's no shortcut. There's no shortcut around the process, you
No.
ha because when you look at the political machine and the different ways that they have uh, uh, at, throwing up obstacles and of, trying to prevent the people to actually
Mhm.
occupy their place of
Mhm.
superintendence over them, which is more than just a once every 4-year activity. It's supposed to
Right.
be an ongoing and it's a deep commitment to doing chores, like to doing real work and to be,
Mhm.
really engaged. And so, there what we believe is this can't happen. This is impossible. What our mission and our goal is impossible if God doesn't intervene. So
True that.
we repeat all the time, unless the Lord builds the house, they who
Yeah.
labor on it labor in vain. And so we believe that 100%. But we're
Okay.
responsible, and we believe God rewards and responds to faithfulness. When you've
Mhm.
been made aware that you have a duty to do and then commit yourself to do it, we believe that God honors that. And so
Okay.
what we're looking for is 1/2 of 1% of the population.
Okay.
That's it. That's all it's gonna take. 1/2 of
Yeah.
1%. And,
Well,
yeah,
why don't you I mean, we're coming up on like an hour and 15 minutes. I told you it wasn't gonna be that long, but it is, and that's okay because there was a lot in there, and honestly, I've enjoyed talking to you very much. I think it's good, and I'm really glad that John put us in contact, and
yeah, me too.
John Antros, who is the, he's, the Wisconsin state coordinator.
Yeah,
Is there a way that people can find out more information about you guys?
yeah,
If you can
really
give me a
simple.
website or something,
Yeah,
Facebook, I don't know, whatever.
just go on tacticalcivics.com,
Okay.
tactical civics, all one word,
Okay.
.com,
Mhm.
and you'll see, right there, a 12-minute overview of our
Mhm.
mission that
I've watched the video a couple times,
yeah,
so
that I
yeah.
present, and that
Mhm.
just kinda spells it all out,
Mhm.
and again, it's dense, there's a lot there,
Mhm.
um, and here's the beautiful thing is y you could pay $5 to join, uh, and go through our orientation process where we really guide you through, what we're doing and why, and learn, kind of the details of how we intend to execute, our plan, our mission.
Mhm.
You can spend $5, everybody, every one of us wastes $5 every month on something that we don't need. So just
Mhm.
don't waste that $5 and spend 30 days. You can download every book that we have, gobs and gobs,
Sure.
a mountain of information. You can download all
Mhm.
that, you can read all about us, and then you can cancel your membership. Yeah, we just want people to be made aware. We want people to
Right.
learn. So you can go on tacticalcivics.com. You can join us for $5. You can go through our
Okay.
orientation process. There's also a website, and you can write this down. Um, and this is an 11-week video series that I created specifically for Christians in America to
Mhm.
to see civic duty as a vocation, a calling from God, that is unique in America, that Christians in no other country in the world have the same calling that Christians in America do, all because of our system of government, because the people have been made the sovereign governing authority. And
Mhm.
I believe, and I've as a pastor, I have ignored this, and I've misread Scripture. I misread Romans chapter 13 that says submit to the governing authority. Well, that has specific application if you're living under Roman civil law. But in America, over and over and over, it's spelled out in explicit terms that the people are the sovereign governing authority.
Mhm.
And government serves the people, not idealistically, not philosophically, but legally. Legally, according to our highest law, the offices of government are servants of the people who are their sovereign. And so, I just, I just encourage people to go. But oh yeah, the website. So the website, yeah, 11 week. It's an 11-week series, and the website is NWWR. So it's based on a book we have called Now When We Rise. It's NWWR dot
Okay.
online.
Dot online. Okay.
NWWR dot online, and
Okay.
11 like 15-minute presentations where
Okay.
I break down who we are as Americans, what our
Mhm.
system of government really is. I give the history of it, kind of, show how, there was a point in our history where where Hamilton's mercantilist dream, where economy would be managed by the government's and authority and power would be concentrated in the federal government. Uh, it won the day in Abraham Lincoln's presidency. Lincoln
Mhm.
was a student and an admirer and a devotee of Henry Clay. Henry Clay developed what was called the American system, which had the goal of implementing mercantilist economic and political philosophy on the American system of popular constitutionalism. Concentrate power in the government, to have a central bank, a national bank, to set up a system of internal improvements, which were government subsidies to favored businesses, and that's what we have now. It's blown up. It's gotten
Yeah.
really sophisticated, but essentially what we have was born in Henry Clay's mind. Well, in Hamilton's mind, Henry Clay. Then Lincoln got it done. He got that central bank established through the Legal Tender Act. It set the table,
Mhm.
managed economy, concentrated power in the central government, and that's what we've been under ever since. And that really is the breeding ground of authoritarian control measures,
Mhm.
a technocracy, of oligarchy. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, I've heard that word.
yeah,
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that we probably will do again
yeah,
another one. We talked a little bit about doing one on grief
that would
too,
be
and
fantastic. That's such an
I would love that.
important thing,
It really is.
to
So we're
talk
gonna
with
stay in
people about.
contact.
It
Yeah, we are
it
gonna
it
stay in
it is
contact.
something we all share. We all have solidarity
Yes.
around the reality of loss, of grief and loss.
Yes, we do. Yes, absolutely. And I really appreciated you, speaking to me about that and talking about some books and all that'll help. And I
Yeah,
appreciate that very much.
sure.
So I want to say it was a pleasure meeting you, Jeff. And like I said, we will stay in contact. I'll send you the link. It's going to be long, but that's okay. I mean, I
That's
think this
fine.
is good.
That's
Yeah, this
fine.
is good. Sometimes, when people are like cleaning their house, I put a podcast on. I put my earbuds in
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
cleaning.
Oh,
I'm busy.
absolutely. Yeah.
I learned so much.
I sat through 2.5 hour podcasts a lot. I listen to
Oh yeah.
3 hour long conversations. Joe
Joe
Rogan
Rogan
has
can do
made
I know, he
millions
can
on long form podcasts.
I know. He can do pretty much anything, and I'll listen. The only ones I don't listen to are the MMA fighters. That's
Right,
about it.
right,
But
yeah, right.
I'll listen to just about anything of him because he usually has some pretty good stuff on there. And that Theo Vaughn, he's coming along too. I kind of like that.
Yeah,
I'll tell you
yeah,
what, Megan Kelly has a great podcast. Hers is
he
really good
does.
too. So I listen to a lot of really good ones, and I like well-rounded, and hers is usually
Yeah,
very well-rounded.
yeah.
So it was a pleasure meeting you, a pleasure
Yeah,
talking to
yeah.
you,
Thank you,
and
Cheryl. Really is a pleasure to
yeah.
talk with you as well.
Yeah, so I'm just going to end it by saying, for more information, go to tacticalcivics.com and check them out. I mean, it's worth it, and it's worth finding out what your history and your rights are, and it is very important. I told him we started off a conversation about civil liberties and how offended I was about that at the time.
Yeah,
So I totally agree with almost everything that
yeah.
we talked about today. So I appreciate your time very much because I know you're very busy. And this is Jeff Calhoun, the national spokesman for Tactical Civics. Thank you for joining me, Jeff, and take care of yourself. And let's be in contact. All right.
Okay, Cheryl. God bless.
God bless you too. Thank you. Have a good day.